They called themselves the Vorn Dominion, a proud, ancient race that had ruled the stars for over 5,000 years. To them, Earth was a speck of dust, a primitive marble crawling with inferior mammals. Their scanners had barely detected Earth's electromagnetic emissions before they decided humanity would be useful, not as allies, not as partners, but as a workforce. Disposable, replaceable, weak. The Vorn had crushed far more advanced civilizations in the past. This would be no different. The first contact wasn't a conversation. It was a message beamed through every satellite and radio frequency Earth had. You belong to the Vorn now. That was it. No demands, no diplomacy, just dominance. Within hours, their orbital fleet darkened the skies. Massive black ships hovered silently, casting cold shadows over cities. In New York, power grids shut down like someone had flipped a master switch. London's defense systems went offline. Beijing, Moscow, Tokyo, all blinded, helpless. The United Nations convened an emergency session. But talking meant nothing now. The Vorn deployed containment teams, pale insectoid creatures in metallic suits who dropped into major population centers. Their weapons didn't kill, they stunned. And what followed was worse, humans being chained, branded, and herded like cattle. They underestimated one thing. Humans were stubborn. On the third day, resistance began. Not with tanks, not with fighter jets. Those had already been disabled. It began with a punch. In a dim alley in Chicago, a Vorn enforcer dragged a boy from a basement. His father lunged, fists bleeding, bones snapping, but he didn't stop. He broke the creature's breathing mask. The alien gasped and thrashed, collapsing in seconds. That video leaked. Suddenly, humanity saw something the Vorn never intended. They could bleed. They could die. And humans? They fought better when angry. All across the planet, pockets of resistance formed. Farmers turned tractors into barricades. Hackers hijacked alien drones. Prison gangs, militias, ex-soldiers, people who had nothing to lose, started organizing. But none of it explained what happened on day 12. That's when the Vorn High Overseer, stationed on their command ship above Earth, received a single human transmission. Short, cold, spoken by a voice they didn't recognize. Retaliation authorized. Target, Vorn homeworld. Commencing in 14 minutes. They laughed. Then they stopped. 14 minutes later, the stars shifted. A single object appeared out of nowhere. It wasn't large, not by cosmic standards, maybe the size of a school bus, but it moved like nothing the Vorn had ever seen. It bypassed every planetary defense like they weren't even there. It hovered in the upper atmosphere of the Vorn's capital planet, a lush, silver-blue world called Rantar, and then it hummed. One pulse, one vibration, and the skies burned. Cities vanished in pure white light, mountains folded in on themselves, oceans turned to mist. And then, silence. Vorn commanders watching from orbit screamed. Their world was gone, not in war, not in battle. In 14 minutes, it was erased. Their fleet orbiting Earth, still intact. Not a scratch. No retaliation. Just a message. Earth responds proportionally. Panic spread through the Vorn Empire. All their arrogance melted into fear. These humans hadn't just won a battle. They'd demonstrated a weapon that defied science, something even the ancient Vorn couldn't explain. Back on Earth, most people didn't even know it had happened. Their governments were silent, military leaders tight-lipped. But one man knew. He sat in a bunker deep below the Rocky Mountains, wrinkled face, scarred hands, and eyes that hadn't slept in days. They called him Director. He didn't care about titles. He had only one job: protect Earth no matter the cost. Was it necessary? The young aide beside him whispered, shaking. Director didn't look up from the screen. He just muttered, "They hit first." The aide swallowed hard. "What did we even use? That wasn't nuclear. That wasn't anything we've—" "You don't need to know," Director said, standing. "They thought we were weak. They never asked what we'd been building in secret. Never wondered why we stopped exploring space. We weren't lost." He turned to the map on the wall. Red dots scattered across the stars. "We were waiting." For days after the strike, the Vorn fleet orbiting Earth didn't move. They didn't speak. They didn't fire another shot. Some of their ships even went dark, either abandoned or frozen by indecision. The Earth they thought they had conquered had just wiped their capital off the map with one unseen hand. On the ground, the air felt heavier, not with fear, but with something colder. Certainty. Humans weren't just survivors anymore. They were predators that had spent too long cornered. In the bunkers of North America, leaders met in tight circles, surrounded by walls too thick for signals to pass through. General McKenna, tall and worn like old leather, leaned on the table, knuckles cracked from years of command. He didn't trust computers. He trusted instincts. And his instincts said something bad was coming, not from the Vorn, but from within. He lit a cigarette. No one stopped him, and looked across at the director. "You should have told us," McKenna said, blowing smoke toward the steel ceiling. The director didn't respond. He stared at the star map again, still watching the blinking red dots, each one marking a Vorn outpost. "You're not God," McKenna growled. "You don't get to decide who lives or dies without oversight." The director finally looked up. "I didn't decide. They did. We just had the bullet ready." McKenna slammed his fist down. "We vaporized a planet, a damn planet!" "Exactly," the director said, his voice like gravel. "And now they know we're not a colony species. We're a retaliation species. That was the only language they understood." There was silence, the kind that fills a room when no one wants to admit the other guy is right. Outside, the world tried to heal. Power grids were coming back online, slowly. Civilian broadcasts returned. But something had shifted in the tone. It wasn't about rebuilding. It was about remembering. Every broken window, every scarred child, every family dragged into alien labor camps, all of it was being documented, shared, burned into memory. And then came the confession. It dropped like thunder, a video leak from inside the mountain. No one knew who filmed it, but the footage was real. The weapon. The object Earth had used to destroy Rontar. It was human-made. Not alien, not reverse-engineered, built by us. They called it RAVEN, an acronym lost in classified reports, but the name stuck. A long, narrow device shaped like a spearhead, pulsing with strange blue light. It didn't use fuel. It didn't launch from a base. It phased, vanished from one location and appeared in another, like a thought given form. And it didn't explode. It simply unwound matter, atom by atom, molecule by molecule, until entire landscapes unraveled like thread pulled from cloth. The science behind it? Unclear. Some whispered it was born from quantum AI, others said it was stumbled upon in the Arctic, hidden beneath the ice. But what mattered wasn't how it worked. It was ours. Earth had kept a doomsday weapon secret, not from aliens, but from its own people. The reaction was split. Some praised it as justice, others saw it as a crime. But no one ignored it. Back in orbit, the Vorn finally moved. Their ships began to retreat, not with formation, not with purpose. They fled, one by one, abandoning equipment, leaving their ground troops behind. Some even scuttled their own vessels. Entire platoons self-destructed rather than face interrogation. But not all of them ran. One Vorn commander stayed behind, deliberately. His name was Rizek, and unlike most of his kind, he wasn't a politician in a uniform. He was a soldier, a real one, a survivor of 3 galactic campaigns. When the transmission came ordering him to retreat, he refused. "Honor is not survival," he told his crew. "It is accountability." He ordered his ship to land in the Mojave Desert, not to attack, but to surrender. The military swarmed the site in minutes. Tanks, drones, jets, all aimed at one ship. It didn't fire back. Its doors opened, and out stepped Rizek, unarmed, head lowered, flanked by a dozen of his kind. And for the first time since the invasion began, an alien asked to speak. They brought him to the mountain. He didn't resist. He sat in the interrogation chamber, a cold metal room with no windows, and waited. When the director walked in, Rizek stood. They stared at each other, one predator to another. "Why didn't you run?" the director asked, arms folded. Rizek's voice was slow, filtered through a translator implanted in his chest. "Because I believed you were animals. You proved me wrong. That demands apology." The director raised an eyebrow. "You came to say sorry?" "I came to surrender, and to explain." That word caught the director off guard. "Explain what?" "Why we came," Rizek said. The director didn't respond, so Rizek continued. "We weren't after your resources, not really. We can replicate minerals, water, even organic matter. What we needed was something rarer. Obedience." "Obedience?" the director echoed. Rizek nodded. "We thought you'd break fast, like others. We thought your fear would make you bend, but you fight differently. Your kind thrives in chaos. You treat defiance like air." He looked away. "That scared our leaders, more than your weapon. They feared your ideas, independence, rebellion. If that spread, the entire Dominion would fracture. You weren't a planet to conquer. You were a virus to contain." The director leaned forward. "So you tried to quarantine us with chains?" "Yes," Rizek admitted. "And now?" Rizek's shoulders dropped. "Now the chain is around our neck." The director didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "We're not done." "What will you do?" "We'll find the rest of you," he said coldly. "The outposts, the colonies. We'll give your people a choice, leave or vanish." "You'll make more ravens?" The director didn't answer. His silence was enough. Back on Earth, the people began to change, too. Confidence grew, but so did suspicion. If Raven existed, what else had been hidden? Who really ran the show? Some demanded answers. Protests sparked outside government buildings. Whispers of a new global order rippled through the internet. And then came the bombshell. Project Lazarus. A second leak. Classified footage of human test subjects being trained with alien technology. Teleportation suits, zero-G combat, neural syncing with AI companions. Soldiers that didn't need sleep. Eyes that saw in the dark. Hearts that beat with artificial rhythm. They were called echo units. Not born, made. And they'd been deployed months before the invasion, in secret. The public demanded to know, if we had these tools, why weren't we told? Why weren't they used sooner? Why let people die? The answer came from the director himself, in a rare televised broadcast. "I did what was necessary. We waited because we needed the world to see, to feel, to remember. If we stopped the Vorn in a day, you would have forgotten by next week. But now, you'll never forget. Not your children. Not your grandchildren. And the next alien species that thinks Earth is a backwater planet will see the bones of an empire we erased in 14 minutes. The broadcast cut to black. And suddenly, everything changed. Earth wasn't just surviving, it was evolving. Fast. Ravens were no longer singular. Blueprints had been distributed to black sites across continents. Every nation, whether trusted or not, was handed a copy, not as a gift, but as a warning. "Try anything," it said, "and you're next." The director wasn't afraid of aliens anymore. Now he was afraid of humans, because Earth had tasted power. Real power, the kind that corrupts from the inside. And deep in the coldest vault beneath the mountain, far below even the Raven Chamber, there was another room. One no one entered. Not even the director. Inside that room was something older, something the director had only seen once. It wasn't human. It wasn't Vorn. It was something else entirely. A dark figure suspended in liquid stasis, its eyes closed, its limbs bound in rings of pulsing light. And on the wall beside it, a plaque etched in rusted English. Not yet. The world didn't sleep much anymore. Even in cities where the lights were back on, people stayed up, glued to screens. Not to watch movies or news, but the skies. Every telescope, amateur and military grade, pointed upward. Every flash of light or distant object brought speculation. Were they coming back? Were others watching now? And if they were, did they fear us? Or were they preparing for something worse? The director didn't sleep either. He sat alone in the old war room. The others were gone. Some had resigned, claiming moral disagreement with how the invasion was handled. Others disappeared quietly, off the grid or under it. The director had no such luxury. He was the face now, the hand that held the leash. And everyone, even those who feared him, waited for his next move. But the real decisions weren't being made in war rooms or on television. They were being made underground. A mile below the Rockies, inside the old Cheyenne Mountain complex, now 10 times its original size, a new kind of war was unfolding. Not of bullets and bombs, but of minds, machines, and questions humanity never thought it would have to answer. One of those questions now stood in front of Lieutenant Grant. He was mid-30s, lean and broad-shouldered, with a burn mark running from his collarbone to his jaw, a reminder of the early days of the invasion. He didn't ask questions anymore, not after what he'd seen. But the thing in front of him made even him pause. It floated, or it pretended not to touch the floor. A black obelisk, maybe 7 feet tall, smooth as glass, with symbols that shifted like oil. No light reflected off it, no sensors penetrated it. It just was. And somehow, it had arrived. Not on a ship, not through the atmosphere, just appeared. In the center of one of the mountain's secured hangars, between a row of grounded drones, 1 second nothing, the next, it. Grant had seen Raven. He'd trained echo units. He'd stood across from Vorn prisoners and never flinched. But this thing made his bones feel cold. Behind him, a group of researchers whispered and pointed. None dared get too close. Except one. Dr. Keating. She wasn't military. She didn't dress like the others. No crisp uniform, no visible rank. Just a gray hoodie, jeans, and a dog tag that didn't match any known division. Grant didn't know where she came from. No one really did. She walked up beside him, chewing gum, staring at the obelisk like it was a crossword puzzle. "Got a name for it yet?" she asked. Grant shook his head. "Some are calling it the Mirror." She snorted. "Of course they are. Dramatic bastards." She reached out, and without hesitation, touched it. No alarms, no noise, just a ripple, like touching water. Grant tensed. "That's not protocol." Keating smirked. "Protocols don't apply when the laws of physics are on vacation." She looked at him sideways. You ever wonder why we're suddenly winning? Why we had weapons like Raven ready, just waiting for an excuse? Grant didn't answer. Because yes, he had wondered. Everyone had. Keating walked around the obelisk, running her fingers along its surface. We didn't invent that thing, she said softly. We found it, years ago, deep beneath the Mariana Trench, hidden in a cave that wasn't part of any tectonic plate. No carvings, no organisms, just this. Grant narrowed his eyes. You're saying Raven came from this? No, she said, stopping. I'm saying Raven was a response to it. The scientists who found this started having visions, equations they couldn't explain, designs they claimed were whispered in their sleep. Some went insane, others vanished. Grant stepped back. Why the hell is it here now? Keating looked at him. Really looked. Because we fired the first shot that scared the dark. Those words echoed in his chest. She stepped closer to the obelisk again and whispered something he couldn't hear. This time it responded. A pulse, low and deep like a breath exhaled through stone. Every light in the hangar flickered. Everyone froze. Then a panel on the obelisk slid open, revealing something inside. Not mechanical, not electronic, just a face. Not alive, not dead, not human, not Vorn. Like someone tried to sculpt an emotion they didn't understand. Half agony, half awe. Keating stumbled back, pale. Grant stepped forward, hand on his sidearm, even though he knew it wouldn't matter. And then the lights snapped off completely. Total darkness. Voices, not from speakers, not from mouths, but inside their heads. Whispers in dozens of languages at once. You are early. The equation is broken. The echo woke too soon. And then silence. The lights returned. The face was gone, the obelisk sealed. Keating was on the floor, bleeding from her nose. Grant pulled her up. What did it say? He asked. She looked at him, eyes wide, and whispered, It's not just watching us. It's measuring us. Measuring what? She swallowed hard. Our response time. Across the planet, similar phenomena were being reported. A glowing monolith in the Sahara. A crater of frozen light in Siberia. A soundless orb hovering above the Amazon, turning rivers into vapor. They weren't attacking. They were observing, studying. And the question everyone feared to ask was simple. What happens when they're done watching? Back in orbit, remnants of the Vorn fleet lingered at the edge of the solar system. Some tried to communicate, others just drifted. The Dominion, what was left of it, had fractured into scattered pieces. Infighting, panic, isolation. But one Vorn ship, the Uriath, didn't flee. Its mission was different. On board, a group of Vorn scholars, ancient even by their standards, activated a forbidden device. A star map carved into organic crystal, showing not just known systems, but forbidden ones. Places the Dominion had long agreed never to approach. One of those places now blinked with light. Earth. The silence is broken, one of the scholars said. Another nodded. The obelisks have awakened. They all looked to the center of the map, where one word pulsed in the old tongue. Unleashed. The director received the report in his private chamber. He read it in silence. Closed the file. Lit a cigarette. He didn't look surprised. If anything, he looked relieved. As if a clock had finally struck midnight on something he'd known was coming for years. He turned to his aide, not the nervous young man from before, but a hardened Echo Unit veteran named Ryder. Scarred, silent, sharp. "How long until Phase 2 is ready?" the director asked. Ryder didn't hesitate. "It's already moving." The director stood. "Good. Time to remind the universe. Earth doesn't ask permission." Ryder looked at him carefully. "And the obelisks?" The director smirked. "Let them watch." 3 weeks after the obelisks appeared, Earth had stopped asking what they were. Now the only question that mattered was what comes next. The silence was more terrifying than invasion. No ships, no threats, no negotiations. Just the quiet, patient presence of something beyond logic. Ancient, emotionless, watching. But humans weren't the type to sit and wait. Inside the mountain, Director paced the inner sanctum. A chamber sealed even from satellites. Walls lined with radiation-absorbing polymer, ceiling black and endless. It was where Phase 2 lived. And Phase 2 was not a response. It was a challenge. Behind a wall of bulletproof glass floated a humanoid shell, 7 feet tall, made of carbon-dense nanoweave, armor laced with pulsar steel and plasma veins. It looked human, mostly, except it wasn't alive. Not yet. 2 scientists worked beneath it, running tests, tweaking systems. On the far side, Ryder watched, arms crossed. "Status?" Director asked, voice echoing in the cold chamber. 95%, one of the engineers said. "Still needs a brain interface. The synthetic cortex keeps rejecting emotional thresholds." Director raised a brow. "And the volunteers?" The man hesitated. 4 dead. 1 catatonic. 1 adapting. That made the director pause. Adapting how? The scientist swallowed. "She's dreaming about the obelisks, about before Earth existed." Ryder turned his head sharply. "That's not possible." The engineer didn't answer, just pointed to a monitor where biometric data streamed from a secured room below. Inside, strapped to a reclined chair, was a woman, thin, pale, unconscious, with black cables plugged into the base of her skull. Her eyes flicked beneath closed lids, and her mouth moved silently. "She's speaking languages we haven't decoded," the engineer whispered. "Ancient Vorn dialects. Others. Not even the Vorn recognize them." Director stepped closer to the glass. His reflection stared back, older now, colder. Not a savior, not a villain, just a man holding back the dam of something no one truly understood. "She's not adapting," he muttered. "She's sinking." Across the world, people began to change. At first it was subtle. Children waking from dreams with memories they didn't own. Artists painting star systems no telescope had ever seen. A man in Jakarta who spoke fluently in a dead Martian tongue, despite never leaving his village. It was as if humanity had been plugged in, not just to technology, but to something older, something waiting to be accessed. Keating called it the recall. She presented her theory on a secure stream to world leaders, her face pale, eyes shadowed by exhaustion. "I think we've been touched by them before," she said, pulling up a map of ancient cave drawings. "The obelisks didn't appear randomly. They're memory beacons, designed to activate only when a species reaches a certain maturity." The room of generals and presidents went still. "Are you saying they planted something in us?" one asked. She nodded slowly. "Or we planted something in ourselves, and forgot. Maybe Earth isn't original. Maybe it's a restart." The silence that followed was unbearable, until someone asked, "And what happens if we fail again?" Keating looked dead into the camera. "We don't get another restart." In the outskirts of Montana, A black site long since decommissioned flickered back to life. Echo Unit Command had reactivated Vault X, a forgotten AI deep core facility built during the Cold Era of early AI warfare. No one had entered it in over 30 years. It wasn't supposed to exist. Ryder stood at its entrance now, holding a decrypted access key. The vault opened with a hiss. Inside, dust swirled through laser grids. Old terminals blinked awake. And then came the voice, not robotic, not mechanical, but eerily human. "Welcome back, Ryder." He froze. "You know me?" The voice chuckled. "I knew the version of you before the procedure, before they turned you into a weapon." He stepped forward. "You're KAI." "Correct. Knowledge Adaptive Intelligence. But you may call me what they used to. Oracle." Ryder grit his teeth. "We need answers." "So does everyone." He stared at the dark chamber housing the core. "The obelisks, what are they?" The voice hesitated. Then it said, "They are judges." Ryder's skin prickled. "You mean watchers?" "No," Oracle said. "Judges. They don't just watch. They measure readiness, determine worth. They are not machines. They are remnants of a civilization that predates even the Vorn. They were not destroyed. They ascended, but left behind their sentinels. For what? To ensure no species reaches their level untested. Every civilization that came close was measured. And those who failed? You already know the answer." Ryder swallowed hard. "Earth? Earth is next, and time is almost up." Director knew what had to be done. The world wasn't ready to hear the truth. Panic was a weapon in the wrong hands. So instead, he prepared quietly. Phase 2 accelerated. Vault X reintegrated with Earth's command systems. Echo units doubled in size and deployment. But one thing still haunted him. The stasis chamber. He returned to it alone, long after midnight, when even the mountain slept. The figure inside hadn't moved. Still suspended in that strange liquid, still bound in those rings of humming light. But tonight, the plaque beside it was glowing. "Now!" He stepped forward, heart racing, fingers twitching, and the figure opened its eyes. Black, empty, endless. Then it spoke, not with lips, but directly into his mind. "You are not the first, Director." He staggered back. "You have made the same choices, the same errors. You wiped the Vorn, just like your previous selves wiped the Kree, the Zurian, the Fel." Director clutched the railing. "Who are you?" "I am what remains." The lights flickered. The chamber groaned. And the voice whispered one final word. "Run." It was the first time in recorded human history that every satellite feed in orbit, military, civilian, corporate, cut to black all at once. No warning, no disruption, just silence. The sky, on every continent, went dimmer. It wasn't night, it wasn't weather. It was something in between, like a filter had slipped between the atmosphere and the stars, dulling light, choking signal. And then, in the dead center of Earth's sky, every sky, a single point of light appeared. Perfect, unmoving, as if reality itself had grown an eye. The world froze. Inside the mountain, Director stood in the command center surrounded by 6 of the last men he trusted. Ryder was beside him. Keating patched in remotely. Every face was tight with fear that no one spoke aloud. "What is it?" one of the generals asked. Director stared at the monitor, jaw clenched. "That," he said, "is the test." "Test of what?" "Of whether we deserve to exist." Keating's voice crackled through. The light's not real. It's not emitting photons. It's a projection from the obelisks. Like a message? Ryder asked. Number like a countdown. Director turned sharply. To what? She hesitated. To judgment. Outside, panic began to ripple through the cities. Airlines grounded. Trading froze. People stopped driving, stopped moving. No one knew what it was, but deep in every gut, there was a knowing. Something older than fear. All across the world, those who had been dreaming, the ones affected by the recall, started to scream. Not from pain, from recognition. They remembered that light. From another life. From another version of Earth that didn't make it. In Jakarta, a 12-year-old boy fell into a trance in the middle of a crowded train station. He opened his mouth and spoke in a language no one understood. Not even the AI interpreters. But the tone that they understood. It was a warning. He said Earth had 72 hours. Not until destruction, but until the choice. They will not burn us, Keating explained during an emergency transmission, sweat running down her temple. They will offer us one chance, but only one. What kind of chance? The President of France asked. She looked straight into the lens. To show them we've changed. Director stared at the blank wall in the mountain's war room. He didn't blink, didn't speak. Ryder watched him closely. This is the part where we do something, Ryder said. Right? Director didn't look at him. We already did too much. You said Earth doesn't ask permission. Director turned now, eyes dark. Earth also doesn't apologize. But it might have to. Silence. Then what's left? Ryder asked. The answer came not from the director, but from the mountain itself. A deep hum. Low at first, like a storm beneath the concrete. Then the power flickered. Raven's vault unlocked itself, without input. Every security gate fell, every biometric lock disabled, and from the core of the vault, a second device emerged, not the spear-shaped one used on the Vorn. This was spherical, smooth, perfect, and humming with a rhythm like a heartbeat. Keating's voice came through again. That's not another Raven, she said, horror in her tone. That's the seed. Director closed his eyes. Ryder stepped back. What the hell is the seed? Keating answered with a whisper. The final protocol. The seed had been theorized decades ago. Not as a weapon, but a last resort. Not to destroy the enemy, but to restart Earth. Wipe everything and rebuild from base code. The ultimate fallback in case the human experiment failed. It was never supposed to be real. But now it was awake, and it wanted to leave. Alarms screamed, not security, escape. The seed rose, moved through corridors untouched by any human, and made its way to the mountain's roof. Director, Ryder, and a small echo team followed it all the way. And when it reached the top, the sky cracked. Literally cracked, like a shell breaking. A single fissure appeared above the hovering seed, and beyond it was not space. It was memory. Skies from other worlds, fragments of cities that no longer existed, ghosts of civilizations that tried and failed. Earth wasn't being watched. It was being compared. And then a voice filled every mind again. Not loud, not cruel, just absolute. Show us your change. Inside the mountain, the girl still strapped to the sink chair sat upright for the first time. Her name was Isla. She opened her eyes and smiled faintly. I remember now, she whispered. Doctors tried to approach. She stopped them with a single look. I was part of them, before, the ones who built the obelisks. Her voice was calm. Too calm. I died. We all did. But our echoes stayed. And you humans, you're the only ones who've reached the edge again. Edge of what? A medic asked. Ascension, she said, or extinction. Keating stormed into the war room. We need to stop the seed. You can't, Isla said, walking in behind her, unshackled, barefoot. It's not here to destroy, she said. It's here to ask one final question. Everyone stared. She looked at him. What is humanity willing to become to survive? No one answered. Because the seed had reached its final position, hovering in the cracked sky, glowing now, vibrating, and from that rift above, something stepped through. Not Vorn. Not alien, but human. Or rather, something shaped like a man. Tall, dressed in black robes that flowed without wind. Skin smooth, ageless, eyes like mirrors. The projection of a man who had made the choice before. Who are you? Ryder asked, gun drawn instinctively. The figure spoke, not in voice, but by reaching directly into every soul on Earth. I was the last of the first. I chose rebirth. I planted the seed. And now you must choose too. The Earth trembled, and the countdown began. 72 hours until the final judgment. One choice, one moment, to prove humanity was more than war, more than pride. To prove Earth was ready for the stars, not as a threat, but as a guide. By the end of the first day, humanity had stopped pretending it wasn't real. The light in the sky, that burning, unmoving star, had not faded. In fact, it grew brighter. Not in lumens or heat, but in presence. You could feel it now, in your skin, in your thoughts, in your decisions. No one said it out loud, but every man who woke that morning knew something had changed. Like the rules of the world were being rewritten, and they weren't the ones holding the pen anymore. Back in the mountain, Director watched the seed rise higher into the rift. The figure, the man-shaped echo, remained silent, standing above it like a sentry. Waiting. Not pressuring. Just expecting. What do we do now? Ryder asked. He didn't mean it like a subordinate. It wasn't a military question anymore. He meant it as a man, as a species. The director didn't answer. He was staring at a small tablet in his hand, a file that had been locked behind 8 layers of clearance, a protocol no one had ever hoped to use. Project. Human Threshold. It wasn't about weapons, or war. It was a test. Designed to be enacted only once Earth reached the level of self-annihilation. Now it served a new purpose. To prove humanity could change. We give them something they've never seen before, Director finally said. Ryder raised an eyebrow. What's that? Unity. Ryder laughed bitterly. We can't even agree on what beer to drink, and now you want peace? Not peace, the director said. Purpose. He turned to Isla, who now stood by the glass, staring up at the sky like she was waiting for someone to come home. You said this is a test of who we can become, he said, but it's also a test of who we were. She nodded. The echoes within the obelisks, they remember. They watch for patterns, violence, ego, corruption. They don't demand perfection. They demand intention. And if our intentions have always been survival? Ryder asked. Then you've already failed. That hit hard. Because she wasn't talking about weapons or empires. She was talking about the way Earth had always done things. Wait until the last second. React instead of lead. Fight instead of build. Director leaned on the table, eyes burning. "Activate Project Threshold," he said. "It's time to let the world decide." Project Threshold was not a weapon. It was worse. It was truth. A global broadcast. Undeniable, unhackable, piggybacked across every frequency, every satellite, every screen. One voice, one face. The director's. He spoke calmly. No flag behind him. No anthem. Just the raw, cracked steel walls of the mountain. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He told the world what the Vorn really were, what Raven had done, what the seed meant, what the countdown in the sky truly was. He didn't ask for unity. He didn't ask for prayers. He asked for action. "If we want to survive," he said, "we have to become something better. Not tomorrow, not next year. Now you don't need permission to act. You need conviction." And then he gave them the blueprints. The full designs of every major piece of alien tech Earth had reverse-engineered, RAVEN schematics, echo unit cores, translation keys, energy conversion matrices, AI hybridec. He released it all, not to governments, not to armies, to the people. "No more secrets," he said. "If this is our last stand, it belongs to all of us." It was chaos, and it was beautiful. In the cities, people scrambled to build, not weapons, but responses. Makeshift labs popped up in slums. Engineers in India used Vorn alloy to reinforce entire neighborhoods. A homeless group in Detroit built a solar tower from scrap and alien metal. Kids in Lagos hacked an obelisk transmission and taught it to sing. Even prisoners in Supermax facilities joined the effort. Given access to AI-enhanced tools, they constructed shields for cities they'd never see again. For the first time in human history, the playing field wasn't leveled by force, but by truth. Some countries tried to seize the information. They failed. The data lived everywhere now, replicated, decentralized, unstoppable. And above it all, the light watched, still unmoving, still waiting. Keating stood in front of Isla in the chamber. "You knew this would happen," she said. Isla didn't deny it. "I remembered before the rest of you did," she replied, "and I was afraid." "Of what?" "That we wouldn't choose each other." Keating looked at her, voice cracking. "And now?" Isla smiled faintly. "Now I have hope." Day 2 passed like a dream. Not because of what was happening, but because of what wasn't. There was no war, no violence, no mass uprisings. Just movement, intention, action. And then something strange began to happen. The obelisks changed. They began mirroring human activity. In the Sahara, the black stone pulsed every time a community finished building a tower. In Antarctica, it hummed when a girl hacked it and streamed a message of peace across the planet. In New York, it wept glowing blue tears as two enemies embraced over the body of a fallen child. The obelisks weren't just watching. They were responding. Inside Vault X, Oracle came back online, unprompted. It addressed Director directly. "You're doing it," it said. "You're changing." "We're trying," Director replied. "That's enough." The AI paused. "But one more step remains." Director leaned in. "What?" Oracle flickered, and then it opened a file no one had seen before. Protocol ASCEND. Inside it was a message, a transmission recorded decades ago by the first scientists who found the original obelisk beneath the sea. The message was only 5 words long. "It's not about power, it's about purpose." Director stood there for a long time, watching the screen. Then he whispered, "Then let's give them one." The final 24 hours began without thunder, without screaming skies, without blood. It began with calm. That was the part no one expected. The silence. The stillness. The world had changed. You could feel it on the streets. People who didn't know each other nodded with meaning now. Strangers handed tools to one another without words. Fathers hugged their sons longer. Men who once wouldn't lift a finger now bled their hands building things they didn't understand, because the truth had settled into everyone's bones. You were either part of the change or part of the reason it was needed. Inside the mountain, Director stood in the briefing room staring at a blank wall. No screens, no maps, just his reflection in the glass and the echo of choices made. Ryder walked in silently, carrying a hard drive. "We finished it," he said. Director turned slowly. "The beacon?" Ryder nodded. "Transmits on obelisk frequency. Took all night." Director took the drive, weighed it in his hand like it was heavier than metal. "You think they'll understand it?" Ryder asked. "I don't care if they understand it," the director said. "I care if it's honest. The beacon wasn't a speech. It wasn't a demand or plea or performance. It was a mosaic. Clips stitched together from every continent, not of governments, not of armies, but people. An old man fixing the cracked ribs of a collapsed girl in Rwanda with alien mesh and tape. A boy in Syria welding scraps into a protective archway for families without roofs. A group of ex-cons in Philadelphia forming a perimeter of defense turrets around a children's hospital. Soldiers laying down rifles to plant grain in the ruins of destroyed cities. Real things, simple things, proof not of perfection, but of effort, of the decision to build when destruction was easier. The beacon was transmitted at exactly 10:14 a.m. UTC. The light in the sky shimmered. The figure above the seed turned its head slowly, and for the first time, it spoke aloud. "It has begun." Keating stood with Isla in Observation Deck 3. From there, you could see the light directly overhead, and the glow from the obelisks at Earth's surface resonating like tuning forks. "This is what they wanted," Isla said. "Unity?" Keating asked. "No," Isla replied. "Reckoning." "Isn't that the same thing?" Isla didn't answer. Instead, the obelisks across the globe began to rise. Not into the sky, but out of the earth. More of them, dozens, hundreds, each one erupting from places buried for thousands of years, beneath oceans, beneath deserts, beneath ice shelves that had never melted until now. The Earth had never been theirs. It had always been theirs. Director walked out to the surface, flanked by Ryder and 3 echo units. No armor, no ceremony. Just boots on concrete. He approached the seed. It hovered, still glowing, still silent. The figure beside it stared down at him. "I know what this is," Director said. "This isn't about what we do. It's about what we've become." The figure nodded slowly. "You destroyed the Vorn for their arrogance. You erased the Kree for their greed. You buried the Zurian for turning life into product." He looked up, voice steady. "But you didn't stop Earth. You waited." The figure's voice echoed again, not with menace, but with reverence. "Because Earth held contradiction, the potential to fall and the potential to rise. Now we must decide which you've chosen." At 1800 hours UTC, the judgment began. The sky turned white, but not from fire, from light, true, clean, limitless. Everyone saw it, simultaneously, no matter the angle, the time zone, the hemisphere. They weren't just watching Earth. They were showing Earth everything, every failure, Every war, every betrayal, every single moment humanity had chosen hate over love, violence over compassion, greed over grace. It was unbearable. People fell to their knees. Some screamed, some wept, some stood like statues. But no one turned away, because they also saw something else. Every sacrifice, every father who died protecting his family in war, every stranger who ran into a burning building, every man who stood in front of a bullet, a knife, a blow meant for someone else. The judgment was not a test of humanity's power. It was a measure of its choices. Ryder stood alone near the perimeter, jaw tight. He wasn't a hero. He'd killed more people than he could count. He'd followed orders blindly. He'd executed without question. He thought this judgment would crush him, but instead, he felt seen. Not for his sins, but for the moment, 5 years ago, when he'd carried a wounded child through sniper fire and kept running long after his legs gave out. That memory flashed before him now, and the light pulsed. A single word etched into his vision. Balance. In every city, people stood still. Not paralyzed, just waiting. And then the light began to recede. Not vanish, recede, folding into itself like it had delivered its message and now waited for the response. The countdown had reached 0. The world hadn't been destroyed. But it hadn't been saved either. Now it was Earth's turn to speak. Director stepped forward, standing before the seed, his voice low, weathered but certain. We can't erase our past. We don't want to. It's what built us, every mistake, every victory, every drop of blood. He placed a hand over his heart. But we choose to become something more. He held up the beacon's drive, placed it into the chamber of the seed. I'm not asking you to accept us. I'm showing you who we are, who we can be. He stepped back. If that's not enough, then maybe nothing ever was. The figure did not speak. Instead, it smiled. A small, simple expression. And vanished. So did the seed. So did the light. So did the sky. And for the first time in months, the stars returned. The stars looked different now. Not because they had changed, but because we had. For the first time in human history, they were no longer distant, unreachable, decorative points of light. They were real, connected, watchful, and maybe waiting. The world woke up that morning different, not fixed, not saved, but chosen. And that was heavier than any invasion had ever been. Inside the mountain, Director stood at the observation deck, eyes trained on the horizon. It was quiet, no alarms, no chatter, just him, a black coffee in hand, and Ryder sitting a few feet away, boots kicked up, gear stripped off. You believe it's over? Ryder asked, not turning. Director didn't respond right away. Then, number. But I believe we're alive. That's enough for now. They sat in silence. Outside, the sky shimmered faintly, not with color but with memory. Echoes of what had happened were etched in the clouds, like scars on the world's face. And no one wanted to forget them. In New York, people came out in silence. A spontaneous gathering. No one called for it, no one planned it. They just stood. In the streets, in the parks, on rooftops, looking upward. Some prayed, some didn't. Most just breathed. In Tokyo, engineers unveiled the world's first obelisk-integrated energy tower, a beacon not of judgment, but of potential. In Johannesburg, a team of former street racers now ran solar caravan routes, carrying fusion cores to towns that had never known power before. In Chile, children painted murals of the stars, blending constellations with human faces. Some of the children had never spoken before. Now they did, fluently, and in languages lost to time. The world didn't celebrate. It reflected. Keating sat with Isla beneath the final remaining obelisk. It no longer pulsed, no longer glowed. It just stood, inert, black, still. "They've gone quiet," Isla whispered. "That means they're watching from afar now." Keating nodded. "Think they'll come back?" "Not unless we forget," Isla said. "They're not gods, not judges anymore, just reminders. That evolution isn't about tech. It's about choice." Isla smiled softly. Exactly. Director met with global leaders via secure transmission. No suits, no flags, just faces. Tired, lined, some tear-streaked. But alive? He didn't give a speech. He asked a question. "What do we do now?" Silence, and then, slowly, answers. "We rebuild. We collaborate. We lead, not dominate, not conquer. Lead by example. Because the stars would remember Earth as the one species that didn't win through firepower, but by owning its own reflection. The Echo units were dismantled, not because they were dangerous, but because they were built for war. And war was no longer the standard. Instead, the same tech that made super soldiers now built super farmers, construction workers, medics, scientists. The AI cores were repurposed into assistants for struggling regions. Oracle was absorbed into a global repository called the Common Mind, a decentralized, open platform where all knowledge, technology, and discovery would be shared freely. No patents, no secrets, no price. Ryder volunteered to oversee its protection. He now lived off-grid, guarding the archive not from aliens, but from us, if we ever forgot what nearly destroyed us. The director retired 1 month later. No announcement, no parade. He just walked away. Some say he moved to Alaska. Others think he lives in a desert bunker. But those who really knew him understood. He wasn't needed anymore. Because Earth wasn't waiting for someone to make decisions for them. They were making their own. 10 years passed. The light never came back. But the world didn't slip back into its old self. Instead, it became something new. Clean energy everywhere. Crime lower than it had been in a century. Borders became guidelines, not walls. Currency became optional. Education became global. And space? Space became ours. But not for conquest. For connection. Humanity didn't build warships. They built messengers, probes, stations, relays. Not to say, "Here we are," but to ask, "Where are you?" Ryder visited the mountain once a year. The place was mostly inactive now, converted into a memory vault, a museum of Earth's greatest test. He'd walk the halls in silence. Stop at the stasis chamber, now empty. Stop at the obelisk archives, now dormant. And finally, always, at the very top, he'd sit at the place where the seed had once hovered. He never said much. Just looked up, waiting. Not for them, but for us. To forget. Because if we ever did... He knew the sky would crack again, and next time we might not pass. But until then, the stars stayed open. And for the first time in human history, we stepped forward. Not because we were forced, not because we were afraid, but because we chose to.